Welcome to Booking It. Today's episode will be The Wheel of Time. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Booking It. I'm, of course, your eloquent host, Cooper Cobbs, and joining me today is my good friend, Mr. Tanner Lewis. How you doing, Tanner?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Well, Tanner and I are both sad because our good friend and fellow podcast member Bryson has embarked on, the journey, the grand journey that we call college. And he and his family took off from Paris, Texas today, and they're making their way up all the way to Idaho. And according to Tanner, they won't be stopping along the way. So
be praying
for them. They'll be there by the time, hopefully, you receive this. But anyway, Bryson is going to have a lot of fun in college, and hopefully we'll be able to keep doing the podcast together. So anyway, Tanner and I thought that we were together in the same place doing some fun things, and we thought, let's record a podcast on Wheel of Time because, number one, we've been reading it for a very long time. Tanner just finished it a few weeks ago. I finished it back in May. And,
May?
I finished it in late May, yeah.
Jeez, and I thought I was close to finishing it with you.
No, yeah. Oh, well, at one point, I thought the same thing, and then I surpassed you. We'll talk about it. Anyway, I think a lot of people who listen to us maybe want our opinion on Wheel of Time, knowing that we've been reading it and knowing that, hey, it's a popular fantasy series out there. And, hey, you know what? Maybe we can offer a Christian perspective on Wheel of Time. I think there are some things where it provides for interesting dialogue in terms of our worldview and maybe just some ideas that are getting discussed in the series. So the plan is to do one episode today on just general Wheel of Time thoughts, ideas, just ideas, world building, some character stuff. Anyway, we're going to be focusing on general things, no spoilers. If we do have a spoiler, it won't be very deep, and we'll give due warning. And the next episode will be kind of a in-depth spoiler discussion, probably focusing mostly on the last book, A Memory of Light, and kind of the things that happened there.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll probably come out a week after this if we can get that done, because then I will be gone to college, and Tanner will be the Lone Ranger for a few more weeks before he's off to do his fun thing in Spain and across the sea. So anyway, we're not there yet. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, though, Wheel Time. Tanner, why would you start reading a 14-book series that I'm not talking generally? Why would you, Tanner Lewis, open up your Kindle one day and be like, you know what, let's start Wheel of Time?
It wasn't even my Kindle. It was my iPad.
It was iPad, sorry, the Kindle app. I apologize.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't even I was so cheap on this one. It was cheaper on the Apple Books app.
Oh, Apple Books.
For some reason.
Okay.
I don't know how it was cheaper than Amazon, but it was. For some reason, that first book.
Yeah, and that's weird because this would have been around the time no, this had been after the first season.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think they were rebranding the books or something. Because I had started. So, kind of my story of how I started it was I had watched the first season of the Wheel of Time show. This was back when I was, to be frank, staying up extremely late, binge watching entire seasons of shows coming out on Amazon Prime.
And this has stopped?
Yes.
Okay, good.
It's actually surprising how well I've stopped that. But for some reason that school year I just kept on doing that. I don't know. I went through. I've watched almost every original show on Amazon, at least the first season of it. That way.
Don't recommend, by the way.
Don't recommend doing that. This is not do this. This is how I got here.
This is a did this, not do this. Yes, exactly.
Anyways, watched the first season of The Wheel of Time that way, and did that in kind of the first semester of school, so fall. Enjoyed it, but didn't love it.
Yeah.
And then I remember we went to the Tulsa Speech and Debate Tournament to be able to compete, and we had gotten back on the end of the third day, and I had gotten into the hotel room that we were staying in, and I picked up my iPad, and
hang on, this is you started Wheel of Time before this.
Oh, no, this is when I'm starting.
No, because I know that I started in December of 2022. Okay, that's when I started. You started in the fall of 2022. I am 100% sure of that.
Really?
Because I was well into a couple books into Wheel of Time by the time this tournament happened.
So is my memory just
Here's
incorrect
how I
about
remember it.
this?
You show up to class one day, with the Amazon context, and you have just said, "Hey, I started Wheel of Time." I'm like, "Oh, cool." We had a couple mutual friends. Well, at that point, they weren't mutual friends. No, were they? I guess they were. We had a couple
Yeah.
mutual friends who, through speech and debate, big Wheel of Time fans, love the series, and it's just out there in terms of being a big fantasy series. And so
Mhm.
you had started it. So yeah.
Yeah, that actually is right. How have I gotten this wrong in my memory? No, I got like the third or the fifth book that time at Tulsa. Dang, I've been telling this story wrong for months.
Oh well, it's okay. Alas.
That's funny. Anyways, clearly Cooper knows my life better than I do.
Well,
Um,
I know my life, and then in reference to me, I can tell where you're at.
yeah, that's valid. Anyways, clearly
So
my story
I'm a
is off.
narcissist. Okay.
Binged it. Started Wheel of Time. I guess according to Cooper now that fall, which sounds correct now, and got started. And man, it's a 14-book series that has average of 600 pages per book.
Right.
It's not a oh my
light
gosh,
endeavor.
I'm not going to. You can't do this in 3 months, guys.
Yeah.
And if you do
You're
it
doing
in
it
3
wrong.
months, then, dear Lord, I pray for your soul.
Yeah. What was I going to say?
How
don't
did
know.
you get into it, Cooper?
Well, basically was
did I have an influence in this? Is really
Um,
the question.
maybe a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, it's probably there. The big reason was my ex-debate partner and I, give each other Christmas gifts, and we typically give each other a book, And so he's like, "All right, so hey, Christmas, what are you thinking this year?" And I'm like, "You know what? Let's do it. Let's jump in. We'll do Wheel of Time." All right. So I wasn't buying the book. My friend graciously bought me the box set of the first 3 paperbacks, and you were reading it, and I was like, if I do 1 book a month, that'll be fine. Even I thought getting the first 3 books would maybe last me 6 months. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
I was planning on taking it slow, reading them at a time, and reading other stuff in between. And then I read the first book pretty fast, and I wasn't planning on starting the second book for a very long time. And I started it pretty soon after I finished the first book. But I think the second book was one of the books that took me the longest to finish.
Yeah.
I think it's top 2 in terms of. So I didn't finish that until probably February. Even though I started in December. So anyway, after that, just kind of book a month, audio booked it. Over the summer, it took me a while to finish book 7 last year. And then in the fall, at kind of working, early mornings, late nights when there's not a lot of people there,
Mm-hmm.
I listened to back to back to back, kind of the slog books as they're known,
Yeah.
on audiobook, and kind of made it through. And then just kind of finished it up in the spring, taking it kind of slow, and finished in May. So that's kind of my history.
Yeah. I think as far as how quickly I did them, I think story I've been telling is around 18 months. Clearly, it's a tad bit. No, 18 months still sounds about right. If that's fall of 2022,
Yeah.
then that's about 18 months. Yeah, to right now.
No, it's probably even more than that.
Is it more than that?
Mhm.
Am I looking at? Have I been in this series for 20 months?
Yeah.
Dear Lord, what have I done with my life? Anyways, as far as timeline goes, I do remember I finished book 1 relatively quick. I knocked out 2, 3, 4, just back to back to back. I remember I bought all of the. I have books. I have books 2. I bought the digital book for the first one, but then books 2 through, I think I got 2 through 11.
Yeah.
2 through 10, something like that.
Yeah.
I got a lot of them at once. So I was able to, I knocked out almost all of those. I knocked out up until book 6 or 7, in probably 4 or 5 months. And then I do know for a fact 7 through 9 was short but not short. I know that those 3 books took me probably 5 months to get, which just tells you how bad the slog is. After that, I know that 10 was my longest one. I mean, you'll correspond to this story, but I remember you had just started listening to audiobooks whenever I started book 10. You would switch to audiobooks whenever I started book 10. and I was listening. I had not been listening to book 10. I had been reading. I'd still been reading my physical copies up until book 10. And I was reading my physical copy, and I think I was stuck on that book
Yeah.
for 6 months.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, legitimately, it was probably 4 to 6 months I was stuck on book 10. It was just horrific, just so bad. Finally bought the audiobooks and flew.
Yeah.
After I got
You
the
picked up some
audiobooks,
steam, yeah.
because I know for a fact that like I probably took 2-ish months, maybe 3, to get from 11 to 12.
Mm-hmm.
But then 13 and 14, I finished both of those within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Which I was on vacation. Don't worry, guys. I do have a life.
It's funny. Okay, I think that we were on. If you listen to the podcast, I guess last week or last time, Tanner and I talked about how we went on our big fancy road trip with just the 3 of us, Tanner, Bryson, and I, cross country, and Tanner's 12 passenger van. It was a lot of fun. But sometimes when Tanner was just like grinding out because he drove the most of us, by far, he would listen to Wheel Time and finished book 12, I think, on the way.
Yeah.
On the way, and powerful moment. It was good stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. So we've kind of covered the history. What are your thoughts on Wheel of Time? You finished it. Good, bad, yes, no.
Yeah.
Recommend, thoughts, question mark.
As far as like the recommend goes, here's really what I have to say about this. I'm never going to tell somebody this is a must-read book before you die.
100%.
I think I think it is really good. Do not get me wrong. Like, as far as like books go, definitely somewhere within my top 10 series.
Really? Okay.
Top 10 series.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like truly enjoyed it. Very memorable. Just the storytelling is just absolutely amazing. To be able to stick with it for 14 books and, only have 3 or 4 books of where it's actually bad. Like, that's 10 good books.
Yeah.
Do you know how hard that is? 10 good books is really hard for a lot of authors. You know what I mean?
Well, and, one died, so.
That's true. It's even more impressive that you're able to, like, have it so detailed that somebody can carry on the legacy with such precision that it's that good. So as far as, like, the recommendation goes, I'm only telling somebody to read this if they claim that they love the show. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like,
really?
That's the only time where I'm like hard and fast. You have to go read at least the first book and tell me that you still love the show.
You've seen the video how Wheel of Time fans recommend the Wheel of Time.
I have, and I agree with it
It's a perfect
wholeheartedly.
encapsulation of what happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is that people basically recommend it and don't recommend it, but above all else, they say don't watch the show.
Yeah.
That was after the first season. It was before the second season, so
the second season was better.
Interpret it how you will, but it was pretty accurate. So.
Yeah, I think so. As far as that goes, as far as like if I would recommend this to people that are listening to us right now, seriously consider it before you jump in, because you can only jump out after book 2. Like, you can't, and even then it's kind of
it's tough.
It's tough. It's really encapsulating world, and obviously it took me and Cooper, like, legitimately, I don't know people that read faster than us to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, well, and let's be real, I was intentionally pacing myself, like, reserving it for the audiobook space after a certain point, trying to make sure I was reading things in between. Like, we have a friend who was only on book 6, and he started before us. So, like, I think it's smart to spread these out. But don't spread them out too far to where, you're, like, lost in the story.
Yeah.
That can happen.
So it's a long haul, I guess, is the thing. And so you can't recommend it to somebody who's like, what should I read next?
Over the summer, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, this is the kind of person where your bookshelf is clear and you've read every single thing on it, and everything that I bring up to you, say you've read.
Yeah.
And so this is the kind of thing, kind of the position that I was in whenever I started this series of like, what the heck am I going to read next? Yeah. Like, everything else is not holding my attention. It's all mediocre, like young adult literature. Like, give me something that's good that I can hold on to for a significant amount of time and not. I mean, I had just come out of, that was the same time that I had just come out of reading all of those, what's even the name of it? Those Keeper of the Lost City books.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so I was on.
Check out our
I was
famous
starving.
episode on that for the discussion.
starving for
You can
good
hear
literature.
Tanner's recovery session.
It's a problem.
yeah.
I still have to go finish that series because of how
I don't
sucked
even know. Has
into
like
it
a
I
new
am.
book come out yet?
Dude, I
so.
haven't even checked. I don't really want to because I've been able to tell myself I can forget about it. Nonetheless, that's kind of where my recommendation goes. As far as like a yes or no, like it is absolutely amazing. Like as far as like a story and a book series go, it's really hard to get better than the character development that you have from book 1 to book 14.
Right.
It's really hard to get better from like a cohesive storyline that branches across so many different characters that all ties perfectly back into the rope that we started directly at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I had to go listen to the first chapter after finishing the last book. And just after doing that, like the way that entire thing just wraps beautifully back into itself is just amazing.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good stuff. That's some good stuff there. My take is, so let's start with Lord of the Rings, as we must. So Lord of the Rings has the unique quality of not only being the best fantasy novel ever written, it also has the quality of being, I think, one of the best pieces of literature in English ever written. And so it has this idea, this kind of duality of being excellent at the genre and excellent just at literature, at being complex and deep and rich with characters and prose and themes and ideas, and also being really good at world building and just all the fantasy stuff. Not many books have that twofold quality in the fantasy genre.
Mm-hmm.
And people complain like, oh, fantasy gets overlooked as a genre. It's like, yeah, true, but like, when's the last time a fantasy book could compete with like something good?
Yeah, seriously.
Like, on in terms of literary level, which is why literary books tend to do better at awards. I don't think it's really a snob thing entirely, at least. So like, I would hand Lord of the Rings to someone and say, you need to read this. You should read this. It's a good. It would fall into the category of books you need to read before you die. In fact, a famous endorsement on the back of Lord of the Rings says the English-speaking world is divided into people who have read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and those who are going to.
Legitimately.
That is a true statement and an ought statement for every person. So Wheel of Time falls into the first category, and I wouldn't say as strongly in the second category. So in terms of fantasy, it's great. Like in terms of like next to Tolkien, like the second tier, it's one of the best things I've read in fantasy. That's not Tolkien.
Yeah, hard to compete with.
Yeah, hard to compete. I personally think it's better than Stormlight Archive. That's another thing. I actually finished Stormlight and then began Wheel of Time. And I'm going to reread Stormlight in the fall because of the new book that's coming out.
Yeah.
And so maybe I'll do a podcast on that, and we'll see if my mind changes. But I think I like Wheel of Time better in terms of character, in terms of story, in terms of narrative and theme, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I find it really good. And like Tanner said, I would recommend it to a specific person. So I wouldn't say this is good literature, read it. I would say you like fantasy, you like good characters, good story.
You have nothing better to do with your life.
You have you're willing to, like, you have the will, the desire, the motive, and the drive. Read it, like, jump in, have fun. I think that for the right person, it will be rewarding. So, like, for example, the second book in the Stormlight Archive, Words of Radiance, has one of the highest ratings on Goodreads for the amount of reviews that it has, like a 4.7 to like hundreds of thousands of reviews. And it's because
that's crazy.
The first book is a gatekeeper, and not only is the second book, everyone agrees, like a huge jump up in quality from the first book, but also everybody who everyone who maybe would have read the second book and criticized it is not going to read it because they didn't make it past the first book, right? So that's why kind of it did good. And the same way, Wheel of Time is going to discourage people from reading it, but the people who read it for a good reason like it. So I think you're going to like it. So it's kind of my overall thoughts on just how to treat it, would I recommend it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anything else to say before we move on real quick?
No, not really. I mean, obviously this is very nuanced. Like, the series itself is just such a very specific thing. Like, it's so unique in everything that it is. Like, it's such a good fantasy book, and it's a decent, like, piece of literature. And it's just the problem that I always see whenever I like want to tell somebody, like whenever I tell somebody that I've been reading it, or like if they ask like, oh, what should I read next, and I think about recommending this book, this series rather, it's always like the size of it that really like holds me back. It's like it is a
commitment.
It's daunting.
Capital C
is really what I want to be able to like. Yes, it is amazing and it is worth it, but it is daunting, and I'm not just gonna tell anybody
Right.
to go read it. Anyways.
There's one more thing, which is that I do believe in the category of a book that is a fun read, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
like, oh, look, these are two classically educated homeschoolers saying Wheel of Time is good literature. Okay, we understand there's a difference between Wheel of Time and To Kill a Mockingbird. Like, we understand the difference between a classic and, we understand the difference, to use terminology from a book that we like, between common and between uncommon.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings is uncommon. Wheel of Time is common. I think we both acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Maybe in some senses you could call Wheel of Time uncommon.
Yeah, I think there's
so.
one book. I think there might be one or two books
Okay.
in here that are uncommon.
You could contest that.
Comparatively.
Maybe.
I think I could argue.
If you were to restrict it to the fantasy genre, I would say certain parts are uncommon. In terms of literature, I don't know.
I think that the literature part's a little harder argument to make,
Anyway.
but I think as far as fantasy goes, like there's some hard arguments to make.
All to say, I believe in having a book you're reading because it's a good book, it's a classic. I believe in listening to a book. I believe in reading a good nonfiction book. That's what I have. I have like a couple books going, maybe theology or cultural analysis, an audiobook going, a classic. A fun read is part of that though. And so treating Wheel of Time like a fun read, your fun read for like a year and a half, is a good idea. I think, like being able to, especially for people who struggle to read. Even like I would like to read more. Maybe that's why you're listening. I would like to read more, but I don't know how, or I don't have the drive. Having a fun read is crucial to doing that.
Yeah.
It's crucial to keeping up your reading skills and to like actually enjoy reading. Like some people, they'll start with Harry Potter because that's what gets them into reading, and it's happened for millions of people, and they'll springboard off. So
yeah, like I'm reading 2 or 3 books right now. I'm reading a book called Atomic Habits.
Oh yeah. James Clear.
Yep, James Clear.
Dad started that book and never finished it, so I think he needs to finish the book to be able to finish the book. It's a paradox.
Yeah. It's a really interesting read. But it's hard to read because it's like coming from a guy who just came straight off the Wheel of Time fun read, just like a binge.
It's a different feel. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard to like move from a fun read back into like a hardcore like beneficial sharpening read.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to jump into a nonfiction read, honestly. Like I can't remember.
Different part of your brain, yeah.
After I finished school, jumping into a nonfiction read is like stabbed to the heart. I'm like, what am I doing with my life? I got out of this. I survived. Anyways, I think as Cooper was saying, I think that a fun read is necessary because I definitely see the benefit of finishing this Atomic Habits book. But the only way I'm ever going to get through it is by continuing War and Peace.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's called plotting. Yeah. Plot activity, baby.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's talk about the Eastern aspect of it. Okay. So, the author, Robert Jordan, is very Western. He's American. Like, just lives in a Western, secular country.
Which surprised me after finishing the first book.
Really? Robert Jordan didn't, scream to you, white person in the Western world?
It did. I started to try and explain it away after reading the first book,
okay,
though.
there are 2 options. Number 1, Robert Jordan is a white person like he is. Or number 2, he was an actual Eastern person who migrated to America and came up with an American name called Robert Jordan. Which, good. Hello, I'm Robert Jordan? No, okay. I don't do that. Don't cancel me. No kidding. Anyway, so the whole concept of the Wheel of Time is drawn from Eastern mythology. The idea of time being cyclical, things repeating, that kind of thing. It's very Eastern. What other aspects are Eastern? That's basically it. But it's like the whole worldview of the world.
The semi reincarnation.
True. That's true.
The semi reincarnation is a part of it, but that's also kind of tied into the cyclical.
Yeah.
Everything that is Eastern is kind of tied into that cyclical time nature.
Right.
Type thing, and
there's one more thing, which is the kind of the duality of good and evil. So it's kind of a dualism going on.
The yin yang type thing.
Yeah, an internal fight between good and bad. Which, by the way, as we'll discuss next episode, is completely philosophically untenable and ridiculous. But anyway, neither here nor there.
It was beautiful nonetheless, but we can talk about it.
Anyway, so I'll just say, if you haven't listened, or if you don't know what Wheel of Time is or what the plot's about, and you're listening to this podcast, basically the whole concept of the Wheel of Time proper is that the Wheel of Time has 7 spokes. They represent 7 ages, and those ages will just continue to cycle. So, basically, at the current moment, legends are at the same time distant past and distant future. So, in the past, you'll hear rumors of legends. There were things that actually happened and will happen again. So, time's a circle. Things happen, they repeat. People die and are reincarnated. and the good and evil fight forever. That's kind of the whole concept. Okay.
Mhm.
And we'll talk about next episode why I think that, in more depth and more specifics, why I think that robs some of it of emotional impact. But my question to you is, so as Christians, we are, basically Western in thought.
Mhm.
Obviously there are Eastern traditions, Eastern Orthodoxy,
Yeah.
and other Eastern traditions. But we reject, obviously Eastern Orthodox reject the cyclical nature of time. We believe in, linear time, but also in the fact that Christ came, history has a direction. It's going somewhere. Christ will come again. Christ has died. Christ is risen. Christ will come again. The new heavens and new earth are the end destination. And so actually, we read a lot about it this year. I actually gave a speech about it in class, but Christianity is in large part responsible for this positive outlook on the future, on eschatology, and that's kind of been hijacked by more, progressive ideas of just, progressing with Darwinism and things like that. But
Mhm.
all that to say, Christians reject cyclical time as kind of antithetical to, Christianity.
Yeah.
So, why? Number one, why should we read a book that has maybe some, Eastern things going on? But number two, how does it play with narrative and story, good or bad decision by the author, that kind of thing? So
Yeah, I think for the story that Jordan was telling, whenever he started, like the Wheel of Time was it kind of set his book apart from something, different. But I think that really what set his book apart with that cyclical nature is kind of like what grabbed people's attention originally. But I think that also there's another part of just the fact that his story. I'm trying to think.
Sorry, buddy. I'm distracting Tanner right now.
Yeah, he is a little bit. I guess I never really had a problem with the Wheel of Time, like the actual Wheel of Time idea of time. I don't see it biblically, obviously, and I don't believe in it.
Right.
But I think as far as a story idea goes, there are worse things that you could read. There are worse things that you could read about. I mean, take for instance, Harry Potter, even Lord of the Rings. I mean, some of the things in there are legitimately darker than and worse off for your thinking than kind of an exposure to kind of an Eastern idea. I mean, even you and me have read, I've read the first book of the Three-Body Problem.
Yeah.
And so that is a lot of really
yeah, that is it's an interesting case study and just a worldview collision of man living in China, but also being, so it's Eastern, but also being radically secular and scientific and materialist.
Yeah, and so I think that there was there's a benefit to reading some things like this that I know I probably won't ever finish the Three-Body Problem unless they finally come out with their second season of
the first season
Netflix.
just came out.
I binged it all in one night. It was a problem.
That's you problem.
That is
I thought we said this ended.
I said the Prime Video originals ended.
I'm sorry. I was way too specific in my question.
You were. We don't worry. We don't have Netflix anymore. So I need that's.
The we was Tanner and his demons. That was a metaphor. Keep going.
Okay. But what was I? I was making a point.
You were saying
relatively
engage maybe with. You said maybe good to read.
Oh yeah, it's kind of interesting to have an interaction with that. I think that it's so key to the story, the way that his world is set up, the Wheel of Time. It is the world. Part of this is 14-book, just fully immersed, 100,000% knowledgeable of the world. Tanner talking, 2020 hindsight vision, just in full clarity on, what is the world of the Wheel of Time. And so just as a result, you kind of see that for the story itself, it is 1,000% necessary to have the Wheel of Time.
It's part of the world, part of the integration of the plot. Yeah.
If you took away the Wheel of Time, there was no story. So I think that it's
Well, I mean, to be facetious, without the Wheel of Time, there's no Wheel of Time.
seriously. So obviously you can't just take it. It's definitely does the story credit for like what kind of the centerpiece of what it was, of at least the world building. But I think that also it was like as far as the exposure or like the Eastern ideas that it brings, I don't think that they're so secular that the story
they're
is
obviously not secular. I mean, they're drawn from Eastern religions, so.
yeah. I guess not secular. I guess it's just not so anti-biblical. Like the story, like the world itself is not so dreadfully anti-biblical.
I think what you're trying to make is like he's still a Western man, and so the bad guys are bad guys. Like there is no there's not a ton of like there's complexity and nuance to character, but it's like they're bad people, they're good people. If we can discuss like the philosophical or moral grounding for that, but like it's very Western in that they're good, they're bad. It's not pantheistic. It's not Nirvana-ish.
Yeah, it doesn't pander to like. It's still very much an okay read, despite the fact that it has been heavily influenced by some of those more Eastern ideas for the world building. Yeah.
Yep. I think for narrative reasons, I actually think that it was a poor decision. Okay, we'll talk about it. I'll leave most of those for the next episode. I'll just say
I'm really interested now. You've piqued my interest.
Okay, cool. Well, I plan to. Yeah, it'll be fun. I'll just say I am a big proponent of if something is kind of on the line of should I read this or not, in terms of like an idea that is like maybe in conflict with the Christian worldview. I am much more in favor of read it and discuss than don't read it, especially when it comes to things like Harry Potter or something like that. I am much more in favor of read it and discuss it. And I also don't have a problem with the magic. Anyway, I can defend that if people want me to, but I won't right now. But I'll just say, I agree with Tanner in terms of like, it's not that like damaging. It's not that like, it's not like asserting this is true. Like he knows it's not. He's not. I don't think he has any faith of reincarnation. And at one point, like I thought I read he was practicing like Episcopalian, which doesn't say much in today's modern world. But Episcopalians. I'm sorry. I love my grandma. She's an Episcopalian. She likes Jesus. She loves Jesus. But
my grandparent figures are Episcopalian as well.
No way. That's crazy.
Wow.
Anyway, okay.
That generation, man.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, I'll just say, like, it's still very moral in terms of just its view of good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
It has consequences for characters, and obviously we will quibble with moral decisions here and there. It's perfectly normal to do that.
There is a Jesus figure, but he's not a Jesus figure.
Kind of. It follows the chosen one trope. I mean, it like interrogates it. It discusses it. It dissects it. But anyway, so narratively, I think that there's some problems as we'll discuss. But morally, I don't have a problem with it generally. I think it's an interesting way to like see things. I think it's a cool way to discuss, with your family, friends. Feel like, hey, like that Eastern view of time, does it attract you at all? Well, it kind of disgusts me. Here's why. I don't know. like why you can kind of see why it's false, explain to them why it's false, or I don't know. I don't want to turn it into an opportunity to like soapbox moralism, but I'll just say I think it's an interesting opportunity to see the world, see a story through a different lens. I also like just kind of like examining the conflicts of worldviews and the clashes of ideas and themes. And, three-body problem is pretty interesting for that reason too. But, yeah.
Yeah. I think the thing that piqued my interest almost more than the wheel itself was kind of the weave.
Okay. Let's talk about that too.
Because
the whole series deals with like this, play on determinism and free will.
Yeah, because let's talk.
Which
the wheel
is actually something that I have a problem with that we'll talk about next time too.
Okay. We clearly have a very deep discussion to have.
Good episode next time. Yeah.
Go read all 14 books.
Homework between now and next week. Listen to disregard everything we said and read it in 1 week. Yeah.
Exactly. Anyways, for quick little thing for those of you that haven't read, the weave is what the wheel
the pattern
is
in the weave.
The pattern in the weave. Yeah. Thank you. The pattern is being woven by the wheel. And so the wheel of time has those 7 spokes, and it's being turned by the great serpent and is powered by the one power. For all of those that have read the books, you understand what I'm talking about. For those of you that don't, hang with me. Well, it is weaving the pattern, and the pattern is what everybody is living on. Like every single person is a single thread in the pattern that the wheel is weaving.
Yeah.
Seriously, I still don't know how those narrators didn't get tongue-tied.
Yeah, they well, let's be real, they talked a lot slower than the 2 times speed I had them on. But
that's valid.
And they're like, professional speakers and, readers.
And
even though I'm a 4-year podcast veteran, I still don't enunciate very well, so I apologize about that. Anyway, it's hard. It's a feat, yeah.
Nonetheless, I think that the weave is, or the pattern. Why do I keep on wanting to call it the weave?
Yeah.
Dang, they're really, my brain's really hurting tonight.
It's okay. It's late.
Anyways, I think that the weave is really interesting, just as a part of the pattern. Jeez Louise. Just that we are as far as like a Christian worldview goes, like we actually are a story, and we are like.
And let's be real, pastors. When's the last time your pastor used the terminology of, we're all, everything's being woven to God's glorious tapestry? It's an example that I've heard used pretty often.
Yeah, so it definitely does. It does call into question the free will, predestination kind of thing from a biblical worldview. If you're adding in those ideas.
Well, and here's the deal. Like I think Wheel of Time has interesting things to say about determinism and free will and how that all plays in together. And I think that it's interesting to compare with the Christian understanding of God's sovereignty and human responsibility. And obviously, it's one of the huge debates within Christianity. How do these things play out? How do these two truths of God's absolute sovereignty and man's culpability, responsibility, and ability to make real, meaningful choices, interact with each other? And so, in any system, especially the Wheel of Time, that's going to be an interesting discussion. So, yeah.
Anyways, that's kind of my thoughts on the pattern. I remember it was relatively early on into me reading the series, back when it was still possible to catch people up in less than 4 minutes about what you had already read.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
That's in a different life for me.
I know, right? Guys, we couldn't, towards the end there, me and Cooper could basically only talk to each other and to our mutual friend who had already read all of the series.
Yeah.
Because you have to have read it all to discuss it. You can't catch somebody up on everything that's happened because the world building is so
It's like someone asks you, so
dense.
why are Israel and Hamas fighting? You're like, so in 2000 BC, you see Ishmael, and you have to go way back.
Exactly. Like, guys, for those of you that haven't read the series, there is a companion for the series, one that is sitting in my backpack downstairs right now. And this companion is a 758-page book that is a dictionary to the Wheel of Time. And in it is every single person's name that is mentioned, what they did.
Which are thousands.
Thousands of them. Thousands.
Not every named character is in the book. Only the major ones.
Only the major
ones. But that
ones.
still is hundreds.
But that's still so many names. They've got every place. They've got maps. And guys, you may be thinking, oh man, this is just for nerds. This is the only way I made it through some of these books. Because I couldn't remember 18 months in.
My favorite thing is, like, he'll review basic information, like 10 books in, and we're like, I know that, but who's this random character that is the 12th character that has an S name that is in the same general geographic and cultural area? I don't know, and I don't know their anyway. It boggles my mind why he thinks some things are worth repeating and other things are not worth.
Seriously, and some of the times, like when I would be like whenever I switched from book to audiobook, like that switch, jarring. So jarring.
I bet it was, especially like, 10, 11 books in instead of 3 or 4.
Yeah, like 10 or 11 books in. Guys, I had almost a culture shock. I'm like, wait a second, who is this person? There was one time, I kid you not, there was this one name, and I had been saying it in my mind 1,000% incorrectly because it was so far off from what the narrators were saying. I had to go into Google and voice search the way that they were saying it, to be able to find the Wikipedia page describing that person so that I could figure out who the heck they were talking about.
Sometimes I'm just like, this character showed up. I'm sure they were introduced earlier. I don't remember that. We're just going to say they're in the story now, and we'll track from here. Like, that's kind of what I had to do sometimes. Anyway, you guys, for those who've read the series, you know you can go online and just find a bunch of people, lovingly, wondering what happened with certain things, and lovingly critiquing certain parts of it. And so, for those of you who haven't read the series, like there are a bunch of things you can critique, but it kind of makes the series like more lovable. It's kind of a, it's like your family member has this weird thing they do, but you love them anyway. That's kind of what happens with Wheel of Time. So.
Yeah, really the problem I'm feeling right now is because I love to point out plot holes, like in these kinds of things, like whenever we go into our thing of our next episode, right? I love to point out plot holes. That's kind of my thing. Well, I really legitimately can't point out plot holes in this because I'm pretty sure that they're just blotches in my memory where I don't remember what happened.
Honestly, that is probably a more reasonable guess than anything else. Okay. I had on here to talk about like the magic system and world building. This kind of more turned into an episode about it generally, like ideas, themes.
Yeah.
It's good. It's cool. It's fun.
It's unique. Is really what it is.
Yeah, it is. I don't
like,
have anything to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, but it's special.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember texting Cooper a little bit deeper into book 12, I think it was. No, it wasn't book 12. No, it was book 13. I was like, I finally asked him the real question: the Force, or or the one power. And obviously, like you've got the Force over here.
No, this was just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was relatively.
Question of the day: channeling or the Force?
Channeling is magic. Except, okay, here's what we really need to talk about. How many people had the talent to be able to channel if they learned and just didn't try hard enough? Like, I find it really hard to be convinced that not everybody could channel. You know what I mean? Like, there's a part of me that, like, wants to rail against, the boundaries of, this magic system and be like, I think that everybody can do this.
Yeah, right, seriously.
Like, there's a part of me that believes that.
It's like the part of you that believes the artists that say, oh, the skill that I'm the best in the world at could be learned and not just, inherited.
Yeah,
anyway,
no. But I think it's one of the most interesting magic systems just because, like, it's a magic system that is felt and not and it's the perfect thing of, like, the perfect blend of having a hard magic system and still having it so soft as to be able to throw things in there randomly. Like, there are some skill.
It's natural. It's not.
It's not natural. It is natural. I'm sorry. It's not as random as I just mentioned it. Yeah. But, like, as far as, like, the way that it goes, the way that people like are able to do the magic, right? You can actually lose the ability to do it. And you can gain the ability to do it. And the things that you can do some of the things have been forgotten. Some of them can be rediscovered. And other things in the magic have been just entirely new creations.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Innovations, yep.
And so I think it's just a really interesting magic system because of that, because it gives you just the amount of comfortability that you want with a hard magic system where, like, I can go and I can explain to somebody how it's supposed to work. But still, as I'm reading it for the first time, I can be entirely surprised in book 12 about something that has just been discovered or a new way to be able to do something. And because I have such a knowledgeable understanding of, this hard magic system, I'm able to truly, love and appreciate the discovery that they make, because it's just as surprising to me as it is to them when it happens. But I think that's a lot of things with the Wheel of Time. And I think this is where, if I'm going to get into why I like the length of it really a lot, is just because of, like, it gives you, like, you are the expert as well as the characters. And so you've been with them for so long that it's no longer you're trying to figure out how the world works with the characters as you're going through. You know how the world works. Like, any surprise in the world is a surprise to the characters almost more than you. Mm-hmm. Because, everything that's happening in there, you are almost the character, just almost. there were a couple of times where he gave us way too much information
Right.
and then
Yeah.
withheld
Well,
it
a lot of
from
time, yeah.
withheld
A lot of
it
times.
from other characters for
Yeah, point of view it's kind of
Entire
weird sometimes.
books.
But yeah,
Painful.
because you're like, I know this, but they don't know that.
There was
and it's
one-
annoying to read like pages and pages where they don't know this.
There was one character where it was at least a good book and a half, maybe 2 books, where they had no idea what had actually happened with this other main character.
Mhm.
And they're both main characters, and they just had no idea. And so, but you knew the true story.
Yep.
And so you were getting really mad at this one other character because they were just entirely misreading the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to get fed up. I'm like, I just don't want to listen to this character's point of view anymore. Like,
Right.
I'm kind of done with you. Like, geez, Louise,
Yeah.
bring me back whenever you understand what
Tanner hates
happened.
free speech. He doesn't like listening to people's point of views. So, quote him on that. No, I'm kidding.
Jeez.
One thing I'll say about the magic, I think you mentioned earlier, it has this good combination of understanding what's going on, being a hard magic system, but also having this mystique to it. That's like, almost religious and mythical in some sense. So yeah, world building's pretty good. I like it because it's hearkening to Tolkien in the very beginning, and it kind of grows into its own thing.
Yeah.
And maybe it was its own thing from the beginning, but it starts off, kind of explicitly alluding to Tolkien, but also having a pretty epic prologue that is kind of
Yeah.
non-Tolkienian. It's very well timed and epic, and it kind of, launches you into the Tolkienian stuff. But I like how it's kind of both familiar and unfamiliar.
Yeah.
I like its blend of that relationship.
I think something that I love about it the most is kind of like the geography setup, because for a 14-book series, you really are confined to one continent, and it's not like a big place. I mean, it's big,
it's
but
supercontinent, I guess you would
a
call it.
supercontinent, but there's also other places outside of it, that are never even on maps. An
Right.
entire place that just doesn't exist really, as far as your explanation of it. It's only ever described to you in from secondhand accounts. It's never a first person point of view of a memory of this place. So there's enough things like that, I think, in the actual geography of the world to be able to have just enough unknown about the world itself, because it once again kind of harkens back to the fact of you are these characters, the main characters that you're following, the 4 or 5 main characters that we were with.
Mhm.
Don't worry, guys, 4 or 5 main characters is not as bad as you think it is when you're with a 14-book series.
Yeah.
5 characters feels almost playful at that point. Anyways, you're seeing it from their eyes and from their ears almost, despite the fact that it's not, first person. So all of the information that you're getting is only based off of the world that they know. It's never based off of a third person narrator
Right.
that brings you out, and it's and this other continent over here that you've never seen before was doing this, and this. Oh no, it's a messenger that popped up and yeah, they got nuked.
Right.
You know what I mean? People that have finished it, you know what I'm talking about. Anyways, so just things like that. It's enough. It's just so much. It's so much that you know, but just enough unknown that you are truly enveloped into the world of these characters, and I don't know. You start to feel the way they feel and understand.
And that's why you feel a little sad when the series ends and want to start it over again, even though you know that's feasibly impossible. So
Yeah, but here's the real thing.
I'm sorry, unfeasible and impossible, not feasibly impossible.
When we're talking about the characters, because I don't think we talked about the characters
No,
yet in
yeah,
a
no,
generalized sense, but I'll kind of jump into that real fast. The as far as the actions that they're making, it almost gets to the point where you know so much about the world, and you know so much about the way that character acts and thinks and makes decisions, that you can start anticipating their decisions to some extent.
Yeah,
and
that's what good
thinking
characters do.
Yeah, and thinking through their actions as if you could be the one to make that decision. And you almost always come out making the decision that they make. It's
a good author, yeah.
It's a really good way to do that. As far as the relatability you get to almost every character, despite the fact that you're flipping between 5.
Right. Five main ones.
5 main. Let's not mention the amount of random people we've only ever gotten one POV from.
Yeah.
Which, guys, some of the prologues, I could make you cry.
There are 147 unique point of views.
Okay, here's what you really need to do, because somebody's done this. I need you to search up the amount of names were mentioned in the Wheel of Time. Because this is a question I've had for a little while, but haven't Google searched it yet.
2,787.
Oh, man.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's
It's like an entire city. Imagine having... Dude,
he could write a phone book for the Wheel of Time.
He had to write all of those names.
Or
They're
had some
all
intern
unique
or,
names.
editor or something, maybe.
Oh, I'm certain. Could you imagine the fan mail? He's just like, oh, that's a great name. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
You saved me today.
My favorite moment was when Quinn was like, Cooper, I need this name for like this fantasy building. And I'm like, okay, let's like try maybe like a portmanteau of 2 words. And he's like, that's perfect. I'm like, what? It's like portmanteau. It's perfect. I'm like, okay, whatever works for you. Anyway. Okay, final question here before we wrap up. As a Christian, is there anything you want to talk about Wheel of Time broadly? And then just concluding thoughts.
The Christ figure that's not a Christ figure, we can go into that in the more narrative portion.
I'm always just like, okay, so what? Like,
yeah, I don't know.
I kind of did a whole episode on this called The Resurrection and Storytelling. You guys can listen to about that. About my perspective on that.
Anyways, I think that his story, he's just enough not
explicitly like I'm the
chosen Messiah type thing. Just enough human and not enough God type behavior. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like from a storyline point of view, right? He's not godlike, despite what some of the books would have us believe. So really, like, no, my thing was he kind of grows into this Messiah character and then grows out of it almost as quickly as he grew into it, which is really interesting.
Yep.
Other things from a Christian worldview, I mean, we could mention the polyamorous stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. Let's just say there are different cultures out there, right? And they do some things that are like, no, as Christians,
Yeah.
For us, it wasn't a turnoff. It may be for you. Maybe for some people.
It may be.
And I would recommend, hey, don't read it if you're under 16, probably, for sure.
Oh, no.
So
No.
Hopefully it's understood. We're not endorsing all the content in this book. All the choices the characters make would not be discerning. Please.
Yeah.
We're trying to discuss and interrogate, and the stuff in there that we would object to wasn't enough to make us like not read it, but. For some people it might, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, it might be. I think for me it more sparked like more discussion, or at least thought around that. Not reconsidering it, but like, I mean, it caused a little bit of thought. It's like, somebody might feel that way. What is that? That's not right.
Yeah.
Obviously. And so just stuff like that. It's all about, I think there's some things that deserve discussion.
Yeah.
And but as far as like random things that definitely could have been avoided, but from a worldview standpoint of how deep we got into the series, here's really my problem. What I was talking about of how like you think like the characters and you like act like the characters, and then you like start being so deep into the world that you can think like a person that lives in that world. Yeah, that kind of happened.
Yeah.
Like I can't it's to the point where like I can analyze decisions like from a real world standpoint of like it actually happened, but I can't go out of it and be like he should have changed something about this.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Like that's a struggle for me. Like I'd be like, I can't be like he should have done this differently.
Well, yeah, because like it's internally it makes sense, but like that doesn't mean that it's still right.
I agree, which is why I'm looking at it from like it's a real world perspective of like somebody actually did that, which is a different discussion than it's in a book, which makes it hard.
Kind of, yeah.
Anyways, but that's kind of like just a little bit of a perspective on the way that I talk about these books. I talk about these books like I was a person that lived in them for 20 months.
Kind of really. Okay. think that about wraps it up. I think my final thought is just, it's fun to read a book series for a long time, get invested, and it pay off kind of mostly.
Oh, yeah,
See
definitely.
characters grow and change, and have a fun read. So yeah, that's kind of my take.
With a
Yep.
epic ending.
Yeah.
Like the audiobook, I finished the audiobook, and I remember I was sitting there in my kitchen, and I'm listening to the audiobook, and then we get to the final. They generally end out a book with like a quote from something in the future,
in world book,
an in-world book that is in the future. And so they read two quotes, which is very, very uncharacteristic in this, and they were both really long. Well, kind of long in an audiobook sense. They were kind of long. And then we got to the very end, and he's like, the end of the last book of The Wheel of Time.
and then a single tear falls from your cheek.
And then you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life anymore. I lived in this story for too long. Cooper's not fresh out of this like I am. I'm like, I'm only like,
I have exited withdrawal.
Yeah. I'm still deep within it. I'm still like, reflecting on the ending some nights. I'm like, oh, dang. Just stuff like that.
Well, folks, it better end soon because thus far Tanner has the top two buttons unbuttoned, the bottom one unbuttoned, and he is working his way up. He was fidgeting with one button down there.
They're all only the top buttons.
Oh, I'm sorry.
on.
You put it back on. That one was unbuttoned earlier.
I just fidget with my buttons.
Sure. I believe you. Uh-huh.
I legitimately have ADHD, guys.
In front of a cute girl. Oh man, I'm fidgeting with my buttons. No, anyway, thanks for listening. It's late here. Donor shoutouts. We gotta do those.
Oh, yes. Thank you guys for still giving us money, despite the fact that we don't post.
We do
any
sometimes.
Well,
hey, listen. The posts are a thank you for supporting us. That's kind of how it is.
Because if it wasn't for you guys,
us, even when our thank yous are sometimes lackluster.
Yes, and also thank you for supporting us, despite the fact that we barely. If it wasn't for you guys, we definitely would not be doing this anymore.
Probably not at all.
We probably would have quit this year and felt no remorse. But there are people that send us emails now, which means that we feel like people actually listen to us.
Yeah, and could be a mirage, but who knows and who cares?
Exactly.
We like doing this. We love you guys. Okay. Thank you to
the numbers
Nana.
Are deceiving.
Thank you to Van Pappy and Wayla, Anna, Keenan, Will, my mom, Mrs. Hall, and Kara. Thank you guys so much for donating. Appreciate your support. We'll see you next time on part 2 of this Wheel of Time series. But until then,
keep on booking it.
The end of the podcast about the Wheel of Time.